I'd now like to pass it over to Chief Greg Jones in Amherst, co-chair of the Leadership Development Committee, to welcome you and introduce today's speaker.
Thank you very much, Annabelle, and welcome members of the CFC to the very first class of the CFC Rapid Response for Leadership Development. Today's session will be Level 1, Lead Self. For those I haven't had the opportunity to meet, as Annabelle just said, my name is Greg Jones. I'm the Fire Chief in Amherst, Nova Scotia. I'm also a member of the Board of Directors, and I'm also the co-chair of the Leadership Development Committee. First off, I'd like to let you know that today my co-chair, Chief Paul Boissonneault, cannot be with us, and he sends his regrets. Today, he is representing the CFC at the Heart and Stroke National Roundtable today and tomorrow. So he wanted to be here to open this first session with me today, but I did tell him I would send his regrets to you as well. Today, I'm here to welcome you and thank you for participating in this program. As part of my welcome, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the National Office of the CFC is on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Abenaki and Algonquin people. We acknowledge them as the keepers of the Ottawa Rivershed and its tributaries. We recognize the hurts and harms of the past, as well as the strengths and resilience of the people that believe working together can make for a better future. And I also invite all of you to share your own land acknowledgements in the chat function if you would like to do so. I won't take too much of your time today before we get started, but I want to thank all the members of the CAFC Leadership Development Committee, who over the last year have spent a tremendous amount of time working in developing and reviewing the content of this program. Each one have taken great care in making sure that the course and the concerns for our sector are truly being taken care of. And we are so grateful for the work they have done for us on this wonderful program. Many of them have even stepped up and will be presenting modules of this program. I also want to take the opportunity to thank Motorola Solutions Foundation for their generous grant that made this program possible. They fund many incredible programs worldwide, including other programs of the CFC, such as the previous rapid response programs on the ED&I program, also the ECFO program, and some of our resilient mind courses. They played a key role in the creation of these programs, and they have helped us realize many great goals and provide new resources for CFC members and members of their departments. And with that, we are extremely grateful to them and look forward to our continued partnership as we work together. This course is the first of 3 leadership courses. As leaders, we find ourselves leading others, teams, initiatives, or even organizations. However, the most fundamental form of leadership is leading yourself. It is a gift that each and every one of us have that we give to others. And this course is just about that. It won't answer all your questions. It won't be the last or only leadership course that you'll ever take, but we hope it will draw your attention to key issues, help you feel more confident, point you in the direction of further learning, and support your development, and ultimately improve both your confidence, performance, and support for mental health. This first level of the program will have a total of 8 sessions, and they will be as follows: leadership styles, character-based leadership, the meaning of the uniform, emotional intelligence, mental health, arbitration theory, data and information, and decision-making and ethics. We have a wonderful group of instructors who will, over the next few months, will deliver these wonderful presentations. As you likely know, we run these first editions as a pilot, and your feedback will help us improve the program as it evolves going forward. As a reminder, after each session, we will ask you to complete a confirmation of learning quiz to earn your certificate and complete the course. And to receive your certificate, you must complete the quiz with a passing grade of 70%. I hope you will enjoy what we learn as much as we do. And with that, let me please introduce today's instructor, Chief Michael Boyle from the Kennebecasis Fire Department. Michael is a fire service professional with the Executive Chief Fire Officer ECFO designation with over 26 years of progressive experience in emergency medical services and the fire service. This experience is augmented by a post-secondary education in fire service administration and adult education with a strong background in leadership, incident command, fire department operations, and employee development. He's also a member of the Leadership Development Committee, and we are very much look forward to his presentation today. And today he will speak to you about leadership styles. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to my friend, my colleague, Chief Michael Boyle.
All right, welcome everyone. And I didn't expect to see my picture up on the screen there, but there I was. So Chief, or I'll call you Greg. Greg was nice enough to give me an introduction, but I wanted to introduce myself and give you a bit of my background, but I don't want to share my resume with you. I want to talk a little bit about my background in leadership and why I'm actually here today and why I wanted to talk about it. So it's exciting to be here in the first session of the Rapid Response and Leadership Development Program. And as we go through today, here's the things that we're gonna talk about today. So as the chief had mentioned, we're gonna talk about leadership styles. But before we get into that, I want to speak a little bit about leadership itself. Then we'll get into leadership styles, talk about leadership environments, and then we'll finish off with my recommendations for developing your own leadership. And these are things that I have learned really over the past several decades. And as Annabelle had mentioned, at the very end, there will be some roundtable discussion, questions. But when I said I wanted to talk a little bit about myself, is that I consider myself a student of leadership and certainly not an expert in leadership. And I'm not even sure that it's something that anyone can fully master because there's just so much to it. My experience in leadership goes back literally 3 decades because I started when I was a teenager in Air Cadets. And I'll talk about that a little bit in just a couple of slides. But I think the point of today, and I'm glad Greg said it, is that this is not the end all be all. This is absolutely not going to answer all of your questions about leadership because there's no way we could do that in an hour. If anything, I think my hope is that this gets you thinking about leadership, is that at the end of the session today, you're thinking about leadership, and realistically, you have more questions then than you do now. I think that's what I would consider a success for us today. So it's just a real easy start, or a hard start, I guess, depending on how you think about it, is what is leadership? And I don't think it's something that you probably sit around talking with your friends or having coffee with other chiefs or firefighters discussing what is leadership. But it's one of those things I find really interesting to ask someone. If you want to make them uncomfortable, just say, hey, tell me, what is leadership? And see what definition they come back with. Because leadership, I find very similar to professionalism. You want to have another good discussion, is ask someone to define professionalism and what that actually means to them. So I had said that my leadership experience and my exposure to leadership goes way back. I mean, I was 12 years old, and back then I wasn't very good at hockey, and I was even worse at baseball. So I was looking for something to do as a teenager, and I found myself in Air Cadets. And Air Cadets is actually a fantastic organization when it comes to teaching about leadership. I think basically every year we were there, they had courses on leadership. There's camps on leadership. And when I first joined, and I mean, it's a paramilitary organization. So when you start and you're 12 or 13 years old, you start as a leading air cadet. And if you're lucky enough, you work your way through the ranks and you become a warrant officer first class. And I started as a terrified 12-year-old, scared of the 18-year-old warrant officers. And when I finished, I was the 18-year-old warrant officer. So the thing with air cadets is they have a real focus on leadership, a real focus on rank, a real focus on hierarchy. So at no point would you ever see a sergeant walk up directly to a warrant officer and start talking to them. They would go through a chain of command. So it was something that was really reinforced and taught, and something that I carried forward in my life. The reason I talk about air cadets is that the interesting thing about it is if you're a warrant officer first class, when you walked in a room, people would come to attention. When you walk by them, they came to attention. They would address you as sir or ma'am when they spoke to you. But the interesting thing about air cadets is when it came time to eat, the rank structure you see on the screen was completely flipped. The leading air cadets ate first, the warrant officers ate last. And if there was not enough food for everyone, it was the highest ranks that didn't eat. I'll talk about that a little bit as we go forward with this. That was nothing. That was something that they didn't. It wasn't formally taught. No one told us we had to do that. And I mean, we were probably mimicking the people that came before us. But to me, it speaks about leadership and a culture of leadership. So back then, I had learned this definition of leadership when I was 12, and I have it memorized to this day, and I don't need to have it on the screen for me um, to repeat it. I mean, they drilled it into us, and I'll probably know it for the rest of my life. But when I mentioned that leadership styles, or sorry, the leadership definition, um, I don't think there's a real agreement on what the definition of leadership actually is. This is obviously the definition from air cadets. There is the dictionary definition, which is very literal. It's the office or position of a leader, or the capacity to lead, the instance of leading. And I don't think any of us would probably want to use that as our definition of leadership unless we wanted to be that literal. So as I move forward, and I'm going to talk about mentors and books, and I'll probably talk about Simon Sinek quite a bit. And he is a leadership author, consultant, podcaster, lecturer. And if you've never heard of him before, I would highly recommend look him up on YouTube. He's got at least 3 books out. I've read all of them. I listen to his podcasts, and he has I would say, a very different and a very refreshing take on leadership. So he talks about leadership is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those in your charge. And we'll talk about what leadership styles he's referring to as we move through it. But it is a very interesting philosophy that when you get into a leadership position, it's not about you anymore. It's about the people that you are leading. And I have had some pretty interesting discussions before with other people in leadership positions and other chiefs about whether they believe that it's accurate, or whether they actually agree with it. It's a good discussion to get into. So when you talk about leadership styles, and something that I find really interesting is that if you if you were to do an internet search about leadership styles, the results you get are all over the place. Some of them will say here's the 7 styles, 8 styles, 20 styles. There's again, I would argue that there's no real agreed upon definition of leadership. There's lots of them out there. I would also say there's no real agreement on how many types of leadership styles there are. But I'm going to talk about some of the more common ones. So if you were to search out leadership styles, these are the ones that you will probably see most often, even if where you're looking adds some styles to it as well. So we'll move into the different styles. So as we go through it, and I mean, I'll probably repeat myself and say the leadership style it's in the name. So starting off with democratic leadership. So This is exactly what it says. It's leading from a democratic perspective. It is about encouraging people to participate. It's about sharing ideas. It's also known as shared leadership or participative, but you get people actively engaged um, in the leadership process, or maybe you're working towards a project or working towards a goal. So it's fully engaging all the members of your team as you work through this democratic leadership style. So as we go through the different styles, sometimes may seem like some are good and some are bad, and I would argue that none of them are fully one or the other, because they all have their place. But I am going to talk about the pros and cons that go along with each of them. So democratic leadership, and as we talk about these, I'm sure you've probably either used these styles or been involved with a leader who may have used them. So when we talk about democratic leadership, obviously you're going to have more engagement because you're engaging people um, in your team. And when people feel like they're engaged, when they feel like they are sharing the vision of the organization, they understand the goals of the organization, that can improve morale within the organization. The more people that you engage in leadership projects, ideas, well, then you're going to get those more creativity, more diverse ideas. So it's really taking advantage of all of your team members and pulling them into that decision making process. If you were to talk about some of the cons of democratic leadership, well, it can take time depending on what you're actually trying to achieve. So if you're engaging a lot of people and you're trying to get their opinions and feedback and all that, it can take time to do that. One thing that I would stress with the democratic leadership style is that um, it can, if you're not very clear from the beginning with people that you are involving in democratic leadership, is it can kind of go sideways at the end. Because if I say to people, or you're talking to people in your team and you say, listen, we're going to all be involved in this, I want your feedback, I want your opinions, if they don't understand at the end that you are the one that has to make the decision, um, they sometimes that can cause disappointment and conflict. So they're involved in, they say, here's my opinion, this is great, we're all sharing ideas. But especially in the fire service, it's like, hey, listen, I'm the chief at the end, I have to collect all the information I can, I value your opinion, but in the end, I'm the one that has to make a decision. If they don't understand that from the beginning, then there can be some resentment with that, as in, why are we even here, why are we giving our opinion, feels like it doesn't matter. So just be aware of that when you're involving people in decision making, or whatever it is you're working through in your department, that they understand their opinion matters. But in the end, there is usually one decision maker, and in the fire service, that's typically a chief or the fire chief. So I will also talk about, I think I'd already said it. We'll talk about mentors and reading. And Tom Peters is he's one of my favorite authors, business experts. And this video is only about 2 minutes long, but to me, this is a great example of democratic leadership in action.
I started blogging in June of 2004, and the best part of it, frankly, is the wonderful comments that come from India at 1 a.m. or come from anywhere. And one morning when I logged on, I had gotten a lovely comment from a guy by the name of Dave Wheeler, and it went like this: what are the four most important words in an organization? And the four words were, what do you think? And I thought about it, and I thought, my God, you know, this is just bloody amazing. I mean, it's absurd. I mean, what do you think mean? What do you think when you say it to me means you are a person of value who has an opinion that I want to hear? And so I've started taking it to its ultimate extreme and saying, okay, I want you to keep a little scorecard, keep it in your pocket, wherever else. How many times, and I do, everybody's watching this, how many times in the course of a day do you say, not 5 words, not 3 words, not 10 words, what do you think? We hear this about empowerment and that about empowerment and this program and that program and this training course and that training course. I would argue in the world of engaging people, nothing is better than the 4 words. What do you think? Try it, count it, measure yourself, see what happens.
So at the end of this, I'm going to talk about experimenting and experimenting with your leadership. And someone remind me to talk about that, because I watched that video probably 5 years ago, and I started doing that, and I was shocked by the results of it. But I won't focus on that right now. So moving from democratic leadership, and you may want to call it the opposite of that, is autocratic leadership. So this is the clear command, and clear command decision making is centralized. There is one person in charge. They're making the decisions, and it is typically the my way or the highway approach. I had said earlier that sometimes you may think, well, this leadership style maybe isn't as good as others, but we will talk about where they can be best used. So if you talk about autocratic leadership, my way or the highway, and this is how it's being done, it can be very efficient because decisions are being made quickly and as they're needed. Is it the most effective way? Well, probably a different argument. But it is useful if there's a reason that someone needs to be in control, directions need to be very clear, then there is some utility to this type of leadership style. When I talk about these styles, I'll probably say it a few times, is that leadership styles are depending on environment and context and the people that you're dealing with. And if you were to think about an autocratic leadership style in a business environment, or within the offices, within the fire station, how does that actually impact people? So if there was one person who never asks for feedback or opinions, and they're the ones making decisions, it's going to impact morale, and it's going to impact creativity. And very importantly, it is going to impact the autonomy and decision making of the people that are involved in this type of leadership style, especially if it's in the wrong type of environment. Probably everyone here has had a micromanaging boss before, and I don't really have to say a whole lot about it. Is think about when you were in that environment and how did it make you feel? Kind of the danger of that autocratic leadership style used in the wrong context. And obviously in the wrong context, that you may have high turnover. Is people, there's a saying that people they don't quit jobs, they quit bosses. So then moving into laissez-faire leadership or delegation. So this is very different from autocratic leadership, where this is a very hands-off approach to leadership. The leader may give the goals or the objectives, but then they step back and they don't give much guidance on how to get there. So this works very well, and it can give teams and people the freedom to do things as they see fit. And when you're able to use this leadership style, what it can also do is free things up for yourself, because you don't have to actively participate in, whatever project or activity that is actually going on. And has some, just like all of them, has some good and some bad to it. So unlike autocratic leadership, this has no micromanagement, because it really has very little management. You give a person or you give a team the objective, and you get out of the way and let them do it. Some people thrive in this type of environment because they're self motivated and they really enjoy that autonomy and that freedom. That would be me, is I love when someone tells me what they want done, but doesn't necessarily harass me on how we should be doing it. Um, Obviously, with this one, there could be some accountability issues. Um, I talk about lack of a direction and inefficiency, but again, this one is all about context and audience. So, say you're a platoon chief in a station, and you have an experienced captain there. The driver, the firefighters, they're the ones that's the regular crew that is in, and you meet with him in the morning. You meet with the officer in the morning, and you say, "Listen, hose testing has to be done. There's a training module needs to be done. There's a fire prevention activity at 4. Have at it," and you get out of their way and you let them do things and let them get it done. That can work with that type of team and in that type of environment. Now, if it's the summertime and maybe you have a junior officer in and they have some less experienced firefighters and they don't have that background and they don't have that experience, if you try to use this type of leadership style, you may actually overwhelm them because they just don't have the experience or the background yet to be able to take on that autonomy and get things done without asking you how to do it. So a good leadership style, and I know I was going to say not good or bad, good, totally dependent on context and the people that are involved in it. So moving on to servant leadership. And I had mentioned Simon Sinek. So he actually has a book called Leaders Eat Last. And again, I would recommend looking him up and watching his stuff. But servant leadership begins with the desire to serve, which I guess is in the name. And I had said before that I've had some discussions and some debates about leadership styles, and especially leadership styles in the fire service, and especially fire chiefs ourselves, because the being a servant leader means you are putting the people ahead of yourself and putting people ahead of sometimes the department. I mean, we don't deal with profits, but it can mean putting them ahead of profits and policies. And it is very much about prioritizing your team's growth and their well-being. I had mentioned the air cadet example, that even though you may have had a rigid 18-year-old warrant officer, when it came time to taking care of the younger members, as they did that. And that's why when we lined up to eat, the warrant officers ate last. And this is carried through today for me, is if I am invited to a meal in the firehouse, I will not sit down with a plate until everyone else has. And then we get into these comical scenarios because they're saying, "You're the guest, you sit down." I say, "No, I'm the chief, I'm sitting down last." And then we all just stand there looking at each other. But that is something that has carried through for me. And I think sometimes it depends on maybe your own philosophies or how you feel about being a fire chief of, well, actually, you know what, I'll go here. I'll start with some of the cons of this one, is that sometimes people may see being a servant leader as almost a form of weakness, or they may worry that if they are exercising this type of leadership, that someone may try to take advantage of them and exploit them because of how they feel you may be. But servant leadership, for me, it's something that I feel comes naturally. I want to take care of the people. Like, I want to take care of my firefighters, and this really allows for that focus on others. And I want them to develop, and I want them to succeed. And there's sort of the two sides of the decision making coin with this one, is that if you are a servant leader and if you are doing what's best for your people, then that can sometimes help you with making ethical decisions because you're doing it what's right for the people. And we don't work in business, and we don't make profits, and we don't provide quarterly reports, but we still see the 1980s business models used today, where when companies have to cut or they have to make up for a loss, a lot of places, where they look first is to just dump people and get rid of people. And I can't imagine being in that environment, what it must be like when half your team is gone because the profits are down. I think servant leadership allows you to make decisions that are best for the people. Having said that, when you have that mindset, sometimes it can also make decision making challenges, because there are times where you may need to make a decision that is best for the incident, best for the fire department, and you may have to put the greater good ahead of ahead of the people that you're leading. The thing with servant leadership is it's also very time intensive. So what I mean by that is, if you are going to be a servant leader, when you walk by someone in the morning in the hallway and you say, "Hey, how are you?" Servant leadership means you want to know the answer. It's not just a perfunctory like, "Hey, how you doing?" "Oh my gosh, he actually answered." Is you want to know, like, you want to talk to them and you want to make sure that they're doing well. And of course, when you start having bigger teams and more members in your department, and you want to invest time in all of them, well, that takes time, and it can take effort as well. So moving on from that is getting into transactional leadership. And this is very much the carrot and stick approach to leadership. Is you get compliance by offering rewards or doling out punishments. This type is, or should be, focused on very short-term results. And I can guarantee that if anyone watching today has children, you, especially younger children, maybe older ones, you have absolutely used this type of leadership and have probably used it today. As in, clean your room, you can have 5 minutes iPad time, eat your vegetables, then you can have dessert. It can also be used, like within a fire station, as in, if you guys get your duties done, we'll get your duties done, get things cleaned up, and maybe we'll cancel training later or something like that. It is very much, if you do A, then B. So it's kind of I don't like reward and punishment. Punishment just sounds harsh, but it is more so, like I said, if A, then B. So typically it is very clear. There's a very clear structure and a very clear explanation. If you do this, then that. And it can be focused on efficiency. Like I said, is that you want your kid to eat their broccoli, so you offer up some dessert for that. Some of the cons of it is it's transactional, and people are okay with transactional leadership and transactional decision making, depending again on the context and when you're using it. So it has a very short-term focus, and it's not about creativity, and it's not about getting opinions and feedback. It's about getting something done. The reason that I talk about the short-term focus is that the effects of transactional leadership don't last very long. And the best example I can think of is if someone offers you a lot of money to take a different job, and you think, well, that's just fantastic. I'm going to get paid more and go do a different job, even though I don't like anything else to do with it. About 3 months later, the money doesn't matter anymore, and then you're miserable. So when you're thinking about transactional leadership, it is short term and just usually just trying to be efficient in some way. So transformational leadership, and this one is probably the hardest to explain simply and in a short time. But I would give this explanation of transformational leadership. It is about developing other leaders. That's how I think of it. That's my own definition, and that's there's so many out there's all kinds of literature out there about transformational leadership, but it's about the individual and intellectual stimulation and motivation and influence and trying to, similar to servant leadership, is developing people and developing new leaders. And I mean, whenever I look up transformational leadership, like Steve Jobs he's always appears in the search engine. I can't say enough. I can't say a lot about him. I know he made the iPhone, but I put him up there because he's used quite often as an example. But if you talk about transformational leadership, it's about changing culture. It's about developing people. It's about developing the organization and developing a vision. For anyone who has ever stepped into a leadership role in somewhere that has had maybe a poor or sick culture, I have said before, changing culture is the hardest thing in the world to do as a leader. And I hope you're in for a 2 to 5 year ride, because it takes so long to actually see the results of that. To be a transformational leader can take a lot out of you. Um, it can burn you out. It puts a lot of demands on you. Sometimes you can end up with leader dependence or sort of that cult of personality that the organization hasn't actually changed. They just have someone who has such a strong um, personality that the place hasn't really changed. They just have someone there that's drawing all the attention to them. It takes a lot to practice this type of leadership. And again, we're going to talk about reading later. This is one of those ones you need to go read about yourself and watch videos about it. Just this one is the hardest for me to talk about because I just find it's more complex than some of the other ones. When it comes to being a transformational leader or being a servant leader, is something that I offer the airplane analogy. Is you have to put on your own oxygen mask first. When you're a fire chief and when you're in sort of that high profile leadership position, is take care of yourself. And probably sounding contrary to the servant leadership is you need to set boundaries with people, what you'll accept and not accept, and when you can be contacted and when you can't. So those are all of the leadership styles that I'm gonna cover today. Then I want to get into leadership environments, and this is something that I have thought about on my own. I'm sure there's probably a book out there that talks about leadership environments, but I was thinking about leadership environments more specific to the fire service because we have such distinct operating environments. Now, I'm sure that's the same as EMS, police, military, not so much as an accountant's office or a dentist's office, but we work in these different leadership environments. So this is what I've called them. So I've called the first one the informal leadership environment. So this is daily fire station life. This is sitting down for meals with the crew, informal events, sitting down with them and having a coffee, or just managing by walking around. And when you're in this type of environment, and I'm going to ask the question at the end, is like, what leadership styles would you think would work in each one of these if you were to start to apply them to different ones? These informal environments, and I think it was Jerry Seinfeld, he called it garbage time, spending garbage time with people. And it's just, it can be a really satisfying and a really productive use of time. It doesn't sound like it should be, but I've had some of our best conversations and some of our best ideas come from these informal environments. Like I said, whether that's mealtime or whether that's just sitting and having a coffee with the crew, and people are relaxed. There's less hierarchy to it. I mean, no one ever calls me Mike. Um, Everybody calls me Chief no matter where I go, and people who don't even work here. But there are those less formal environments. So you kind of drop the hierarchy and drop the rank a little bit. Then you move into those formal leadership environments. So they may be training sessions, fire department events, formal meetings. So you can see as you go from the informal to the formal, is that's when, maybe the ties go on and you're much more aware with using proper titles and rank, and there's just more of a decorum to it. So again, you think about those different styles, what type of leadership styles may work in a training setting versus sitting down and having a meal. Then getting into the operational environment. So emergency incidents, emergency management environments. Again, think about working at a structure fire and you're the incident commander or you're an operations officer. What leadership styles are going to work? What ones aren't going to work? And I would probably almost argue that the ones that you think won't work is not necessarily true. And what I mean by that is you have an experienced crew there and you give them an assignment, maybe it's fire attack or a primary search. You have the right crew there. You're actually using a laissez-faire approach because you gave them a task and you let them go and they go do it. But to me, very distinct environments, and you need to be aware of what leadership styles may or may not work in each of them. So they may be rhetorical questions, or if someone wants to discuss these at the end, I think they are worth speaking about. Like I said, is what leadership styles apply to the different leadership environments? Like, what do you think is more efficient and effective in each one of those environments? Something that I would say I struggled with when I first, not when I was an air cadet. I was too young to care about it then. But as you move into leadership positions and you pick up a book about leadership, or you take a course and you read something on the internet and they'll talk about these different styles, it's like, oh, it's like you had to pick one. It was like, I don't know, playing Dungeons and Dragons. You had to be a wizard or a knight. And I kind of had this misconception that I had to pick one. And then I came to realize it's like you may have a default leadership style, but you need to have about 3 to 5 to 7 different styles in your inventory that you are able to use in the appropriate environment. Like I said, environment, context, audience. And sometimes it's like even specific people, you need to be able to use different leadership styles, because something else I learned, especially once I became a chief officer, is what works with one person will not work with another person. And I really believe in autonomy in a workplace, like letting people do their jobs and basically getting out of their way. And because I like that, I assumed everybody would like that, and actually had some of my officers struggle with the lack of direction. Like they wanted me to be more specific in what needed to be done. So sometimes you need to apply different styles based on the individual that you're actually working with. So we're kind of getting towards the end, and I had mentioned what I want to finish up with is how you can develop your own leadership. This probably would have been better titled how I developed my own leadership, or I am developing my own leadership. The video from Tom Peters, he says, go out and try the what do you think approach. So first, I would recommend you experiment. Read about a leadership style and go out and try it and see how you make out. Like I said, it was years ago that I first read about him and then saw that video, and I started using that approach. What do you think? And I was honestly shocked by the results from it. because we have smart officers, we have smart firefighters. A lot of times when they come up to you and they will tell you, Chief, here's the issue and here's what's going on, they already know the answer. And there was a time when especially when I was a newer platoon chief, if they were to come up and they would say, listen, engine one has a hydraulic leak. And they would look at me and I would go, okay, here's what you're going to do is you're going to take the truck out of service. You're going to move up the reserve engine. You're going to do this, 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 and this. And when I started using this approach, they already knew all of that stuff. And there was no point in me actually saying it to them. So if they were to come up to me now and say, Chief, engine one's out of service, it has a hydraulic leak, I would say, okay, what do you think? And they would go, this, 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 it's all of the same stuff. Or it's just, I can't stress enough. Just try it. The next time you're dealing with someone, they come up and they have a problem or an issue, just ask them, well, what do you think? It's just try it. Try it and let me know how it works out for you. The next thing is to seek out a mentor. And this can be an active mentor or it can be a passive mentor. And what I mean by that is you can ask someone, maybe another chief, someone in your organization, someone you know in life to say, hey, listen, I'm really trying to work on my leadership development. Do you mind helping me out and being a mentor? And great to have if you can find someone like that. If not, then find a passive mentor. And I had mentioned Simon Sinek, is that I would consider him to be a passive mentor of mine. As I read his books, I watch his videos, I listen to his podcasts. It is such a refreshing take on management and leadership that I really enjoy his opinion and advice. And I really try to put that into my own leadership styles. Ask for feedback. And I find that sometimes when you get promoted, or especially if you put the white shirt on, is all of a sudden you think, oh man, I have to know everything. And I can't ask people how they think I'm doing. And I have no problem with it. You maybe want to be mindful in who you ask for feedback, but ask someone how they think you're doing. That's perfectly fine. Just say, hey, listen, be candid. Having said that, I would say don't go to someone for advice who you wouldn't take criticism from, but just find the right people and ask them how they think you're doing, and just be open to the feedback. Kind of similar to that is I would say be authentic, because I'm sure everyone has probably seen the firefighter who gets promoted to a company officer, the company officer who gets promoted to a chief, and all of a sudden they go from somebody who was typically kind of a pain in the butt as a firefighter to someone who completely changes once they get into a leadership position. Don't do that. Be authentic. And also, don't be afraid to say you don't know. I say I don't know every day, probably, because the fire service is vast. There's just so much information that none of us can actually, there's no way all of us can know everything. Don't be afraid to say I don't know. And within reason, don't be afraid to show a little bit of vulnerability. You don't have to be the know-it-all, tough guy, all of that once you put the white shirt on. I had mentioned about reading, and really I should have called this read and read more, but also watch and watch more. So these are some of the books that I've read, and I really enjoy reading about leadership and management and watching videos about it. I would recommend, if you want to become a good leader, make it a hobby. Make it something that you start to study and get immersed in. And there are so many smart leaders out there and so many great books. Turn the Ship Around. If you are in an organization that is struggling, especially struggling with culture, can't recommend that one enough. Um, read more, watch and watch more. There are, I don't know, a million different YouTube videos and TikTok videos and all of that stuff out there. There's so much information out there. Just take advantage of it. This one I stole from Colin Powell in one of his books, and it is probably more so applicable to those higher up in the organization, especially if you were the fire chief. And he calls it, he says, be prepared for the midnight moment of loneliness. And what he means by that, and I've experienced it, is that there are times when you are the only one that can make a decision. You've got all the information and all the feedback and all the opinions, but then it's just you, and it is up to you. I think this is more so a recommendation to be aware of it. That if you're a new, your new chief, a new fire chief, especially, because I mean, usually if you're lower in the ranks, is you still have a fire chief to go to. Um, but just be prepared for that. There are times I don't believe that leadership is lonely. I don't buy into that. I've never been in a leadership position and thought, oh well, here I am sitting on top of the top of the castle and there's nobody here with me. It's like, listen, I don't buy into that. There are times that it could actually happen that you need to make a tough decision, and it's all on you. So I'll finish up with this, and I would say the most important piece of advice personally that I would give to anyone who's entering into a leadership position or is in one now is have fun. Um, like fire chiefs, we're so serious sometimes. It's like, oh my gosh, like, can we just have fun with this? Have fun in the role. Like, if you are, and I mean, I don't know who the audience is here today. I'm assuming most of us are chiefs. If you're a chief, what a fantastic privilege that not many people get to experience is being a chief officer in the Canadian Fire Service. Like, just step back and be aware of that. So have fun with it. You don't have to be serious all the time, because if you're serious all the time, you're just gonna, you're gonna burn yourself out. And this was something I had to learn the hard way. And when I got promoted to fire chief, I was way too serious for like the first 3 or 6 months. I didn't even feel like me anymore. And I thought, what am I doing? Like, I like to have fun and make jokes. Just because I'm the chief doesn't mean that has to change who I fundamentally am. So I'll finish up with another Simon quote. Leadership is not a license to do less; it's a responsibility to do more. And I guess that is my philosophy on it: is that the higher you go, the more responsibility you have. So like, again, I mean, he says it as good as or better than I would be able to say it. So I wanted to finish up with that. I had also mentioned at the beginning, I'm not a leadership guru. I'm not an expert. I don't teach about leadership. I don't write about leadership. It is something that has been very like a very personal journey for me. But having said that, is I believe in offering whatever I can to other people who I may have been in their position before, or maybe I have some sort of insight or opinion that I could share with them. So I am perfectly happy to answer emails, connect on LinkedIn. If I can help somehow afterwards, then so be it. So that's it for me. And I want to thank the CAFC, and it's been a real privilege to kick off the leadership series. So I will turn it over to Annabelle, and I don't know where we'll go with if there are any questions or what we want to do from there.
I do see two items posted in the Q&A. We have a comment from Deborah Rogers, who says, "Thank you for sharing your thoughts and perspectives. Leadership is the theme of this month for me." Thank you for sharing that. And then we have a question from Christine. "How do you deal with negative criticism?"
Um, I heard a saying a while ago, and it says, if you want to make everybody happy, sell ice cream. So especially when you're new in a position, I find that one of the hardest things to deal with is criticism, is because you want to do a good job and you want to make everybody happy. And then you will come to realize that you will never make everybody happy. And some people are just never happy. But if I could steal from um, Stoic philosophy, is that when it talks about criticism, if someone criticizes you, then here's what you do. Someone criticizes something that you've done. Think about what they said, because negative criticism is you hurt your feelings and you kind of get your back up. Take a step back. What that person just said, are they right? Like, pull the feelings out of it and step back a little bit and just think, oh, you know what? Are they right? I don't like the person, but is what they said accurate? And if what they said is a um, valid criticism, then use it, thank them for it, and make a change. If it's not a valid criticism and you think, nah, they don't know what they're talking about, then forget about it. And that in itself of letting things not bother you is a skill, because I know it's when you first start, and I'm not sure what your position would be, but you walk into a room and everyone stops talking, and you think like, oh my gosh, they were talking about me. Used to bother me, now I don't care anymore. Um, so yeah, and I think someone posted about there's a good book in regards to it. So that's what I've done now is I've I guess trained myself to not react emotionally to it. If it's valid criticism, I thank them for it. I put it into practice. If I don't think it's valid, I don't thank them for it, and I don't do anything with it.
Just before we move on to some more comments and questions, I do know that some individuals have to leave on the hour and cannot join us for the optional Q&A. So just before we do that, I will ask Chief Boyle and Chief Jones if they have any closing comments they would like to share with the group. And then we'll move on to the optional portion of the course.
Yeah, thank you for that, Annabelle, and thank you for everybody that's here today and had an opportunity to join us. Thank you, Chief Boyle, for the message that you gave today on leadership styles, and I found it extremely interesting. For those of you who can stay, please stick around and ask all kinds of questions and have great conversation on this topic. And please enjoy the rest of the session.
Boyle, is there anything you want to say before people start hopping off?
No, I think I follow. I think I ended with what would be my closing message anyway.
Perfect. So just before that, just a reminder that the next session will be February 20th from 2 to 3:30 p.m. Eastern, so same time. It will be on character-based leadership, and our instructors will be Dr. Mary Carson with the Ivy School of Business in Western Ontario, as well as Jamie Reichard, who will be joining her for that presentation. So with that, I will move on to the next item in the Q&A. We have a comment from John Yadis. Just wanted to say that a reminder on leadership styles is a great opportunity to reflect on our values and leadership abilities and styles, as well as areas for improvement. Thank you, Chief Boyle. We have something from Martina Wall. What would be your best advice for someone who doesn't process the more autocratic or transactional type of leadership? What would be a way you could improve upon that if that is not your personality?
Um, Again, I'm not a leadership expert. So but I would offer this is practice. Is you need to put yourselves into those situations, and I mean it's hard. I mean I'm not a um, confrontational person until I need to be. And I know probably what nobody likes conflict, but sometimes when you get into that autocratic, it's like you have to go out and you have to tell them what to do, and then you get nervous and you get anxious and all of those things. Is I would almost recommend if you've ever been involved in R2MR and some of those practices, as they say, visualize yourself doing it and practice positive self-talk, breathe, and the way to do it is to start small and just practice it with a little thing. So let's say, for example, you you want the truck washed, and you walk out and you say, hey guys, I want the truck washed, and then you walk out, an hour later and they haven't done it yet. And you feel yourself getting angry, but you feel like, I can't say anything. It's challenge yourself to have difficult conversations, and challenge yourself to get to practice those types of leadership. I hate public speaking with a passion. Maybe not as much now, but compared to where I was a few years ago, like having to speak in front of a crowd or speak on a call like this, I probably have a panic attack having to do it. But I deliberately keep doing it and practicing it. And I think if there's something, that autocratic style, transactional style, you're not maybe good at confrontation or good at being seeming decisive, is just practice it. I mean, like I said, as I'm not a leadership expert, I can just say the things that have worked for me is just keep trying. I mean, I had a slide up there earlier. It's a Samuel Beckett quote, and it's fail better, and that's something that I've kind of done with, is like try something and don't worry about doing it great. Just fail better than you did before.
You. We have another question from Pi Kirpin. Thank you, Chief Boyle. How have your views on leadership changed over your career?
It's not how my views on leadership have changed necessarily. It's how I have changed as a person and as a leader. So I was promoted to platoon chief in 2014, and when I was promoted, I had that mindset of, I'm the chief now. I need to know the answers. Can't show any weakness. Got to be the one that knows everything. Got to be the strong one. Sort of that nothing bothers me. I'm the stoic personality of look at me go. And then the older I get, and the longer that the longer I'm in the position, the more I have let go of those preconceived notions of what I thought a leader should be, or what a fire chief should be. I would argue there may be some generational differences compared to a chief from today to, 30 years ago or longer. I have not dealt with, it sounds like I fight with them, but I have had chiefs who were very much of the older mindset of the fire chief is a mythical creature who isn't quite human. So I wouldn't say my views have necessarily changed. I've changed, and like I said, as I have practiced different ones and practiced them, evaluated them, seen what worked for me, seen what didn't work for me, and gone from there. So.
Chief, there's also a comment from Bill Heesing. Thank you, Chief. Great presentation. Thank you for your comment. Okay, another comment from Kim A. How would you start to rebuild broken morale within a fire department?
Um, so when I moved into the chief position, I don't think we had broken morale, but we were pretty close to it. I had mentioned a book earlier, and that turned the ship around. Number one is I would recommend reading that book, because David Marquette can explain it far better than I can. But when you think about the culture of an organization, or the morale in an organization, is you have to think about what makes people want to come to work. When I took over as chief and I presented in front of the entire fire department, and I said, here's my goals as a chief, not what you think it's going to be. Here's my goals. When you are excited to come to work in the morning, you get up and you think, I get to go to work. That was goal one. Goal two was when they left work, they felt good about being here. And I said, if we can get that down, every other problem will be solved. So if you've ever read about what makes people, I'll say happy, what makes people fulfilled in the workplace, it's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. They want to know why they're there. And I think some fire departments are guilty of not saying why we actually exist. We're just here. We put out fires. It's like, no, you don't. You keep people safe. Putting out fires is something you just do while you're working towards keeping people safe. People want to be good at their jobs. Like, you have to train them well and make them well equipped to do their jobs. People want autonomy to do their jobs. Like, get out of their way. Like, stop micromanaging them. If you listen to Simon Sinek, he'll call it the why, the what, and the how. And if you read the book by David Marquette, he calls it clarity of mission, competence, and um, clarity of mission, competence, and something about control. People want to be good at their jobs. They want the freedom to do their jobs, and they want to know why they're there. I don't know if I could give you, I would be happy to talk to you and say, this is where we were 3 years ago and this is where we were now. The hard part about changing culture is you will not see the results of any of your efforts for about 16 months. And it's hugely frustrating. And you've got to keep your eye on the ball, because there were times where you will want to give up. And I know personally with us here, is it felt like we weren't getting anywhere and nothing was changing. And then you would see the little glimmers of little things happening, like people getting more involved, or the tone in the firehouse changed. Like, we actually had people talking and laughing. They would stay after their shift ended to have coffee with each other, where before they used to take off. Sick time was way up, and then we got it down. You can just walk out and talk to people. So changing culture is the really the hardest thing to do in the world. Like I said, I don't know if I can offer much more advice than that, but I would be happy to talk to you um, offline, I guess. So
A comment from Greg Swan from Esquimalt Fire in Victoria, BC. With your background in cadets, Kevin, you know where is leadership training that is required to promo. Do you feel there is room for the CFC to provide a standardized approach to leadership steps similar to the military, outside of online learning, more of a boot camp style?
I don't know. I'll follow my own advice. That might be a leadership committee question, or maybe the board. I'm not sure. I don't really know the answer to that one.
We're always happy to consider any proposal for programs that you have. Greg, you're more than welcome to send me an email about this question, and I can raise it with the team on my end. Okay, a question from Christy Persick. Hierarchy has been said to limit and even destroy innovation, which eventually stagnates culture. Can you comment on how fire service leaders can create a culture of growth and inclusion within the traditional structure of the fire service?
Um, I think I would go back to the leadership environments, is that the structure has its place, but it doesn't always have to be there. I have a personal rule, and that is involve everyone in everything. And we have committees within the fire department, and um, we have our most junior members are involved in those committees, and even in some circumstances, they are leading those committees. Um, it's like, listen, I want the best people doing the roles that we have for them to do. And if you are the best person for a job, I don't care if you've been here for a year or 20 years. We involve everyone in everything, in our committees, in our work. Structure has its place, especially on the fire ground, especially in emergency environments. But inside the firehouse, um, we tend to drop a lot of that rigid structure. We still have it. I mean, if you're new here, you're still the one cleaning the bathrooms and mopping the floor, but we get them involved in everything.
Right on, Chief. The next question we have, Dan has asked the question. Dan said, "Thank you for your excellent presentation, Chief. What would you recommend to do for informal, not a formal course, leadership training to encourage your volunteers or junior members to accept a leadership role in your department?"
I guess if it is to do informally, I mean, informal leadership training, I think is probably, like I said, is give them access to resources. And, maybe you have a library. Of course, some people don't like to read, but, maybe you have a library of leadership books, or you find those online videos that, find the online videos or access to resources that people, that they can use. Like, I'm not informally, that's a hard one to answer. I have a real issue with the in and out leadership training, because you may have had it in your organization. They'll have people come in, they'll, let's do leadership for 3 days. And at the end, you go, yeah, we're all leaders now. It's like, no, you're not. That was a great presentation, but don't walk out of there thinking you fundamentally changed during it. So I would say probably informally is, try to lead by example, get resources for them. Um, I don't know. That's a maybe a harder one to answer.
Right on. Another question from Travis Wright. Are you purposeful in evaluating your leadership skills or styles often? And when working with people or in different environments and paying attention, evaluating those styles that don't work, how do you look at that?
Yes, I do, but it's not a formal evaluation, and I don't score it. But I would say that I am very introspective, and I'm aware of um, trying things and realizing what works and what doesn't work. And it makes you sound like a psychopath, because I will read about a leadership style, or read about something about psychology or sociology, and I will go out and try it. Um, so I don't formally do it, but I'm aware of, how did I think that worked? Um, how did I feel about it? I mean, something I personally do is journal. Is I journal in the morning, so I'll just write down stuff and kind of keep track that way. But I do, as I read something and I will go practice it. Here's the best example: is if you've ever watched or read about mirroring, um, it is it is very interesting when you mirror people. You got to be real careful, do it, or they're gonna know you're doing it. If everything they do and but it is interesting to see when you just slowly mirror people, or you watch how people maneuver when you're standing in a group. Like I said, as I don't formally evaluate it, but I sure read a lot and practice it.
Okay, man, we got another question from Christine. How would you deal with imposter syndrome? I'm a new in the leadership role and I'm still learning my style and getting my feet underneath me. So what advice could you give on that?
I mean, I think that's um, a lot about your self perception, because the secret is that everybody feels the same way. Um, so first off, it's like you're not alone. I can guarantee you, you can go into a multi-million-dollar corporation, have a CEO sitting there, and if you could look into their brain, they're feeling exactly like you are. But I would, first off, is I would challenge those thoughts that sometimes creep in there, like I'm not good enough, I shouldn't be here, they promoted the wrong person, what am I doing here? Just challenge those thoughts. I mean, everybody has those thoughts. There's days still when I think, like, what am I doing here, and how did I end up here? But it's like, so challenge those thoughts. Be aware that everybody feels that way. There are hundreds of articles about imposter syndrome that you can look up online. But also, like I said, is experiment. Find someone who's like a mentor that you can say, hey, listen, I'm feeling this way. And most likely they will say, I feel the same way, or I've been in that position. Experiment, ask for feedback, all of that stuff that I had talked about, kind of at the end, is do all of those things, but also be gentle on yourself. If you're new in a leadership role and you're still learning your style, get ready for not feeling comfortable for about another 2 years. Sorry for the bad news, but it's going to take you a little while to get there. So just understand it's a process, and don't be too hard on yourself.
Now that's a very good point on that. It is a process, and it does take some time. But once you get into the groove, you get into that groove. Next question is: do you feel that there are adjustments that could be made at the recruitment level to identify leadership qualities from the onset, outside of the standard psychometric analysis?
There are presenters later in the series that could answer that way better than I could. Because I feel like there are some people with credentials behind their name that would probably be able to answer that question better. I think I would rephrase your question maybe to say, are leaders born or made? Because I kind of feel like that might be where the question is coming from. That's an awesome debate to have, because I have my own theories on it, or my own opinion, I guess, and I'm sure others do as well. That one I wouldn't have the answer to. I know I can't remember who the presenters are, but I know there are some of them with really good backgrounds who would be able to speak to that better than I could.
All right, thank you for that. In your session, Chief, you mentioned about mentoring. Kind of explain to us how mentoring works around in your leadership skills to mentor people to become leaders and move on in the fire service.
Yeah, I think when I say mentoring, I mean very informal, and I'm not talking about signing on to a mentoring program. As I just mean someone who really you have access to, who's agreed to be there to say, hey, listen, I'm there to answer your questions, listen to your events, listen to your gripes. Mentoring in the fire service, like you can get into a more structured mentoring program. Like we have that for brand new members. So when someone starts in our department, they are assigned a mentor, and that's more like, hey, this is more rigid, and there's going to be 3 month check-ins and evaluations. When I say that, it's more about saying, hey, listen, I need help with this. Can I call you if I need to? Um, just as easy as that. So
Perfect. Are there any other questions anybody has come in? If you have any, please put them into the question answer page, and we'll get to you right away. One thing I will say though, Chief, I like the way you start your presentation out, and you talked about your experience in cadets and how it's kind of shaped things for you. Do you find that you still go back to things that you learned when you were coming up through the ranks in cadets that affect your job each and every day?
oh, absolutely. They're right. Well, the sad part is my kids all play sports, and I couldn't talk them into going into air cadets. Um, but yeah, there are things that I learned then that I still apply every single day. I mean, I don't know what it's like now, but then they certainly put the pressure on, and there was a lot of experiential learning that went on there. So there's things that I learned back then that I still carry me through till today. So.
No, very good. You know what? Unlike you went through Air Cadets, I went through Army Cadets. My kids, when they grew up, I tried to get them in the Army Cadets, and they thought they go to Sea Cadets. So we got all three tri services. So
No, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So with that, there's no other further questions that have come up. Chief, thank you very much for your presentation today. Thank you very much for your opportunity to answer the questions today. And for everybody that had the opportunity to join us today, thank you very much for being here and being part of our very first session. Any of the final words, Chief, you have before we leave?
No, like I said, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm looking forward to the rest of them.
Right on, perfect. Thank you, folks. We'll see you at the next sessions.